The island they don't see. Just a few miles from Manhattan's skyline, beyond the bridges and traffic, sits a place most New Yorkers never visit, yet thousands pass through every year. Rikers Island. Surrounded by water, physically separated from the city, it exists almost out of sight, but not out of impact. What happens here reflects something deeper about the system it serves. Rikers Island is not a prison in the traditional sense. It is a jail complex, primarily holding people who have not yet been convicted of a crime. Many are waiting for trial. Others are serving short sentences. But what defines Rikers is not just who is held there. It is how long they stay, and what they experience during that time. According to public reports and city data, thousands of individuals are detained on Rikers Island on any given day. Some are released within days. Others remain for months, sometimes longer, waiting for their cases to move through a court system that can be slow and unpredictable. For many, time inside is uncertain. There is no clear end point, only waiting. The physical structure of Rikers reflects decades of expansion and patchwork development. The island houses multiple facilities, each built at different times, each with its own conditions. Some buildings are older, with aging infrastructure and limited space. Others were designed to handle larger populations, but even those can become strained when numbers rise. According to oversight reports, maintaining these facilities has become increasingly difficult, as systems age and repairs struggle to keep up with daily use. Inside, daily life follows a routine, but it is not always stable. Movement is controlled. Schedules exist. Meals are served at set times. But beneath that structure, there is unpredictability. Conditions can shift depending on staffing levels, population changes, and internal tensions. According to public accounts and investigative reporting, disruptions are not uncommon. Lockdowns can occur. Access to services can be delayed. Time becomes fragmented. Overcrowding has been a recurring issue. When more people are held than a system is designed to handle, pressure builds. Dormitories become tighter. Personal space becomes limited. And when individuals are placed in close quarters for extended periods, stress increases. According to reports from oversight agencies, this environment can contribute to conflict, making daily life more difficult for both detainees and staff. Many of the individuals held at Rikers are young. Some are entering the system for the first time. They arrive with little understanding of what to expect. According to publicly available data, a significant portion of the population consists of people awaiting trial who have not been convicted, yet they are placed into an environment that can be intense and difficult to navigate. The psychological impact of this environment begins quickly. Uncertainty plays a major role. Not knowing how long one will remain, not knowing how a case will unfold, and not having control over daily conditions can create stress. Over time, that stress can build. According to reports and advocacy groups, extended detention in such conditions can affect mental well-being, especially when combined with limited access to consistent support services. Staff working inside Rikers Island operate within this same environment. They are responsible for maintaining order, managing movement, and responding to incidents. But they also face challenges. Staffing shortages, according to multiple public reports, have affected operations in recent years. When there are fewer officers available, managing large populations becomes more difficult. This can lead to delays, increased tension, and reduced oversight in certain areas. The design of Rikers Island adds another layer of complexity. Its separation from the city makes access more difficult. Transportation to and from the island is limited. For families, visiting can be a challenge. For staff, commuting can be demanding. And for those inside, that physical distance reinforces a sense of isolation. Despite being one of the most well-known jail systems in the United States, Rikers Island has faced ongoing scrutiny. According to government reports, court rulings, and independent investigations, concerns have been raised about conditions, management, and overall effectiveness. Efforts have been made to reform the system, improve oversight, and reduce the population. Some changes have been implemented. Others remain in progress. But the core issues have not disappeared. The structure remains under pressure. The environment remains complex. And the experience of those inside continues to reflect the challenges of a system balancing control, capacity, and care. Rikers Island exists at the intersection of justice and reality. It is where policy meets practice. Where decisions made in courtrooms translate into lived experience. And where the concept of temporary detention can, in some cases, feel far from temporary. For many, Rikers is not just a place they pass through. It is a place that leaves a lasting impression. Not because of a single moment, but because of the environment as a whole. The waiting. The uncertainty. The pressure of daily life in a system that is constantly adjusting, but never fully settled. And as the city continues to debate its future, one question remains at the center of the conversation. Not just what Rikers Island is, but what it represents. Because understanding this place is not only about understanding a jail. It is about understanding the system behind it, and the people who move through it every day. Violence, neglect, and daily survival. Inside Rikers Island, structure exists, but it does not always guarantee stability. Schedules are set. Movement is controlled. Procedures are in place. But according to public reports, oversight findings, and investigative journalism, daily life inside the jail can still feel unpredictable. Not because there are no rules, but because maintaining consistent control across such a large and complex system has proven difficult. Violence has been one of the most documented concerns. According to reports from oversight bodies and the New York City Department of Correction, incidents involving detainees have occurred at rates that raised serious alarms in recent years. These incidents range from fights between individuals to more serious assaults. The causes are not always simple. Overcrowding, stress, lack of supervision, and unresolved conflicts can all contribute to moments that escalate quickly. In an environment where many individuals are under pressure, small disagreements can become larger confrontations. People are placed together from different backgrounds, facing different charges, carrying different levels of stress. Some are dealing with mental health challenges. Others are navigating the uncertainty of their legal situation. When these factors combine in close quarters, tension becomes part of daily life. According to publicly available reports, staffing shortages have played a significant role in shaping conditions inside Rikers Island. When there are fewer correctional officers available, supervision becomes more limited. Areas that require constant monitoring may not always receive it. Movement may be delayed. Response times to incidents can increase. This creates gaps in control, and in those gaps, instability can grow. For detainees, this means that safety is not always guaranteed in the way it is intended to be. Some individuals report feeling the need to remain constantly aware of their surroundings. Not because they are involved in conflict, but because the environment requires vigilance. According to advocacy groups and investigative findings, this sense of constant awareness can contribute to stress and anxiety over time. Neglect is another issue that has been raised in connection with Rikers Island. According to court filings, federal oversight reports, and independent investigations, there have been concerns about access to basic services. Medical care, mental health support, and even regular access to showers or recreation have, at times, been inconsistent. These are not constant conditions for every individual, but the pattern of inconsistency has been documented. Mental health plays a major role in the daily reality of Rikers Island. A significant portion of the population has been reported to have mental health needs. According to public data and reports, managing these needs within a jail environment presents serious challenges. Facilities designed for detention are not always equipped to provide the level of care required. And when support is limited or delayed, conditions can worsen. Isolation, even within a populated environment, can take many forms. According to reports, some detainees spend extended periods confined to their housing areas due to staffing shortages or security concerns. This is not always formal solitary confinement, but it can still limit movement and interaction. Over time, reduced activity and limited engagement can affect mental well-being. Staff inside Rikers Island also operate under pressure. Correctional officers are responsible for maintaining order in an environment that can shift quickly. According to public reporting, high stress levels, long hours, and challenging conditions have contributed to difficulties in staffing and retention. When experienced staff leave and new staff enter, consistency can be affected. Training, experience, and familiarity with the environment all play a role in how effectively situations are managed. The relationship between detainees and staff is shaped by this environment. It is not defined by a single narrative, but by a range of interactions. Some are routine. Others are tense. According to reports, maintaining professionalism and control in a high-pressure setting is a constant challenge. And when systems are strained, those challenges become more visible. Daily survival inside Rikers Island is not just about physical safety. It is about navigating an environment that requires constant adjustment. Understanding routines. Avoiding conflict. Managing stress. Waiting for time to pass. For some, this becomes a temporary experience. For others, it stretches longer than expected. The unpredictability of daily life is one of the most defining aspects of the environment. A day can begin with routine and shift without warning. Movement can be delayed. Access can change. Plans can be interrupted. According to public accounts, this lack of consistency can make it difficult to establish a sense of normalcy. Oversight of Rikers Island has increased over time. Federal monitors, court orders, and independent reviews have all examined conditions within the facility. Reports have documented patterns of concern, recommended changes, and tracked progress. Some improvements have been noted. But challenges remain. What makes Rikers Island particularly complex is that its issues are not isolated. They are connected. Staffing affects supervision. Supervision affects safety. Safety affects daily life. And daily life affects the overall environment. Addressing one issue without addressing others can limit the effectiveness of change. For those inside, these connections are not abstract. They are experienced directly. In the pace of the day. In the level of tension. In the availability of support. And in the uncertainty that defines how each day unfolds. Rikers Island was designed to hold individuals temporarily. But when conditions become unstable, the experience of that temporary stay can become something more difficult. Not because of a single factor, but because of how multiple factors interact at the same time. And as reports continue to document these realities, the focus increasingly shifts toward a larger question. Not just how to manage Rikers Island as it exists, but whether the system itself can continue in its current form. A system at its limit. Rikers Island is not just a place. It is the result of decades of decisions, policies, and pressures that have shaped how detention works in one of the largest cities in the United States. And over time, those pressures have revealed something deeper. Not just problems inside the jail, but limits within the system itself. For years, Rikers has been the subject of reform efforts. According to public records, court rulings, and city planning documents, officials have attempted to reduce the jail population, improve conditions, and rethink how detention is used. Policies have shifted. Bail laws have been debated and adjusted. Programs aimed at alternatives to incarceration have been introduced. Each effort has aimed to address part of the issue. But the results have been complex. Reducing the number of people held on Rikers Island has been one of the central goals. According to publicly available data, the jail population has decreased compared to earlier decades. Yet even with fewer people inside, many of the same challenges remain. This has led to a difficult realization. The issue is not only about how many people are detained, but how the system operates at its core. Infrastructure plays a major role. Many of the facilities on Rikers Island are aging. According to government reports, maintaining these buildings has become increasingly difficult. Repairs, upgrades, and daily operations require significant resources. And even with those efforts, the physical environment can limit what is possible. Space, design, and layout all affect how effectively the system can function. Staffing continues to be a critical factor. According to oversight reports and public statements, maintaining a stable workforce has been an ongoing challenge. Absenteeism, turnover, and recruitment difficulties have all impacted operations. When staffing levels are inconsistent, the entire system is affected. Movement slows. Supervision decreases. Access to services becomes limited. And the environment becomes more strained. Oversight has intensified in response to these issues. Federal monitors, court-appointed officials, and independent investigators have all examined conditions on Rikers Island. Their findings, according to publicly available reports, have highlighted patterns of concern. Recommendations have been made. Benchmarks have been set. Progress has been measured. At the same time, legal pressure has increased. Court interventions have required the city to implement changes, improve conditions, and address systemic problems. These legal actions reflect a broader recognition that the issues on Rikers Island are not isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern that requires structural change. One of the most significant developments has been the plan to close Rikers Island. According to New York City policy announcements and planning documents, the goal is to replace the island-based jail system with smaller facilities located within boroughs. The intention is to create a system that is closer to courts, more accessible to families, and better integrated into the city's infrastructure. But this transition is not simple. Closing Rikers Island requires more than building new facilities. It requires rethinking how detention is used, how cases move through the legal system, and how resources are allocated. It involves coordination across multiple agencies, from corrections to courts to community services. And it requires time. According to public timelines, the closure plan has faced delays. Construction challenges, funding concerns, and logistical complexities have all played a role. As a result, Rikers Island remains operational, even as plans for its future continue to evolve. For those inside, these long-term plans do not change the immediate experience. Daily life continues within the same environment. The same routines. The same uncertainties. The same pressures that have defined the system for years. The broader impact of Rikers Island extends beyond those who are detained there. It affects families, communities, and the justice system as a whole. When individuals are held for extended periods before trial, it can influence employment, housing, and personal stability. According to public research and reports, pre-trial detention can have lasting effects, even for those who are eventually released. Rikers Island also reflects a larger question about the purpose of detention. Is it meant to ensure court appearance, protect public safety, or serve as a form of punishment? In practice, it can become a combination of all three. And when those purposes are not clearly balanced, the system can become difficult to manage. The conversation around Rikers Island has become part of a wider discussion about criminal justice reform. Advocates, policymakers, and community members have all contributed to the debate. Some focus on improving conditions within the existing system. Others argue for more fundamental change. And some question whether large jail complexes like Rikers should exist at all. What remains clear is that Rikers Island is no longer viewed as a stable solution. It is seen as a system under strain, one that reflects both the challenges and the limitations of current approaches to detention. The island itself may one day close. The buildings may be replaced. The structure may change. But the questions raised by Rikers Island will remain. Questions about how justice is administered. How individuals are treated while awaiting trial. And how systems can balance control, fairness, and humanity. In the end, Rikers Island is more than a location. It is a case study in how systems evolve, how they struggle, and how they are forced to confront their own limits. It shows what happens when pressure builds over time, and what it takes to respond when those pressures can no longer be ignored. And as the future of Rikers Island continues to be debated, one thing is certain. The story is not just about what happens on the island. It is about what happens next. What comes after Rikers? Rikers Island has become more than a jail. It has become a turning point. Not just for New York City, but for how large urban systems think about detention, accountability, and reform. And as plans move forward to close it, the focus shifts to a new question. Not what Rikers was, but what replaces it. According to official New York City plans and public policy announcements, the long-term goal is to shut down Rikers Island and transition to a borough-based jail system. Instead of one large, isolated complex, the city intends to operate several smaller facilities located closer to courts and communities. The idea is to reduce transportation delays, improve access to legal services, and create a system that is easier to manage. On paper, the concept is straightforward. Smaller facilities. Better access. More modern infrastructure. But in practice, the transition is far more complex. Building new jails within densely populated boroughs has faced public resistance. Communities have raised concerns about safety, location, and long-term impact. Legal challenges, planning revisions, and construction delays have slowed progress. According to reports, timelines have shifted multiple times, extending the period in which Rikers Island must remain operational. At the same time, the system continues to operate under pressure. The same issues that have defined Rikers Island, staffing challenges, infrastructure limitations, and operational strain, do not disappear during a transition. They continue, even as change is planned. One of the central questions is whether new buildings alone can solve deeper problems. Because Rikers Island is not just a physical location. It is the result of policies, procedures, and systems that extend beyond any single facility. Replacing buildings does not automatically replace the conditions that developed within them. According to public reports and policy discussions, reducing reliance on detention has become a key part of the strategy. Expanding alternatives to incarceration, improving pretrial services, and addressing case delays are all part of the broader plan. The goal is not only to change where people are held, but to change how often detention is used in the first place. But this shift requires coordination across multiple parts of the justice system. Courts must process cases more efficiently. Legal representation must be accessible. Community-based programs must be adequately supported. Without alignment across these areas, the pressure that existed on Rikers Island could reappear in a different form. For those who have experienced Rikers, the idea of closure carries different meanings. For some, it represents accountability. A recognition that the system, as it existed, could not continue. For others, it raises questions about whether meaningful change will follow, or whether problems will simply move to new locations. Staff working within the system also face uncertainty. Transitioning to new facilities means adapting to new environments, new procedures, and new expectations. Retaining experienced personnel while improving conditions remains a challenge. According to public discussions, building a stable workforce is considered essential to any long-term improvement. The timeline for closure has been one of the most debated aspects of the plan. Originally set with specific targets, it has since been adjusted. According to official updates, delays in construction and planning have pushed projected closure dates further into the future. This has led to increased scrutiny, as Rikers Island continues to operate while its replacement is still in progress. Meanwhile, oversight remains active. Federal monitors, court mandates, and independent reviews continue to track conditions. Reports still highlight areas of concern, while also noting incremental changes. The system is not static. It is evolving, but not always at the pace expected. Beyond policy and infrastructure, there is a broader impact to consider. Rikers Island has shaped public perception of detention in New York City. It has influenced debates about fairness, accountability, and reform. And its future will likely influence how other cities approach similar challenges. Because the issues seen at Rikers are not entirely unique. Large jail systems across the United States face questions about overcrowding, staffing, mental health, and pretrial detention. What happens in New York may set a precedent for how other jurisdictions respond. The transition away from Rikers Island represents more than a physical change. It represents an attempt to rethink how a system operates. To address not only where people are held, but why and how they are held. But change on this scale is rarely immediate. It unfolds over time. Through policy adjustments, infrastructure development, and shifts in practice. And during that time, the existing system continues to function, carrying the weight of both past decisions and future expectations. For the individuals still passing through Rikers Island today, these long-term plans remain distant. Their experience is defined by the present. The routines, the conditions, the uncertainty that continues to shape daily life. And that contrast, between long-term vision and immediate reality, is one of the defining challenges of reform. In the end, the story of Rikers Island does not conclude with its closure. It continues in what comes next. In whether the lessons learned lead to meaningful change. In whether the next system avoids the pressures that define the last. Because replacing a place is one thing. Changing a system is another. Rikers Island is often discussed in terms of systems, policies, and reform plans. But behind those discussions are individuals. People who pass through the system, sometimes briefly, sometimes for extended periods, each carrying their own circumstances, their own challenges, and their own outcomes. And while structures and policies shape the environment, it is the human experience that defines its impact. For many detainees, entry into Rikers Island marks a sudden shift. One moment, they are part of daily life outside. The next, they are placed into a controlled environment where movement is restricted, routines are imposed, and uncertainty becomes constant. According to public reports and research, this transition can be difficult, especially for those who have never been incarcerated before. The experience is shaped not only by confinement, but by waiting. Waiting for court dates. Waiting for decisions. Waiting for outcomes that are often unclear. This waiting can extend longer than expected. According to publicly available data, pretrial detention can last weeks or months, depending on the case. During that time, individuals remain in an environment that is not designed for long-term stability. Mental health is one of the most significant aspects of this experience. A large number of individuals held at Rikers Island have been reported to have mental health needs. According to government and oversight reports, providing consistent care within a jail setting presents ongoing challenges. Access to services can vary. Conditions can affect well-being. And for some, the environment itself can make existing issues more difficult to manage. Stress is a constant factor. It comes from uncertainty, from the environment, and from the lack of control over daily life. Individuals cannot decide when they move, when they eat, or how their day unfolds. Over time, this lack of control can affect how people think, how they respond, and how they cope with their situation. Family connections are also affected. Rikers Island's location, separated from the city by water, makes visits more difficult. Transportation can be limited. Scheduling can be restrictive. For families, maintaining contact requires effort and resources. For those inside, limited contact can lead to a sense of disconnection from the outside world. According to reports and research, maintaining family ties is an important factor in long-term outcomes. When those ties are strained or interrupted, the effects can extend beyond incarceration. Relationships change. Support systems weaken. And reintegration becomes more challenging. For younger detainees, the impact can be particularly significant. Entering a jail environment at a young age can shape perception, behavior, and future decisions. According to public data and studies, early exposure to incarceration is linked to long-term consequences, not only for individuals but for the communities they return to. Staff members are also part of this human impact. Correctional officers, medical personnel, and support staff operate within the same environment. Their roles require maintaining order, responding to incidents, and managing daily operations. But they also experience the pressures of the system. Long hours, high stress, and challenging conditions can affect performance and well-being. The interaction between staff and detainees is influenced by this shared environment. It is not defined by a single pattern, but by a range of experiences. Some interactions are routine and professional. Others are shaped by tension. According to reports, maintaining consistency in such an environment is a continuous challenge. One of the most difficult aspects of the human cost is that it is not always visible. It does not appear in statistics alone. It is reflected in daily experiences. In stress levels. In relationships. In how individuals respond to the environment around them. When individuals leave Rikers Island, the experience does not end at the gate. According to research and public reports, time spent in detention can affect employment, housing, and personal stability. Even short periods of incarceration can have lasting consequences. Missed work, disrupted routines, and legal uncertainty can all carry forward into life after release. For those who are not convicted, the impact can be particularly complex. They leave without a sentence, but not without the experience. The time spent inside still affects their lives, even if their case does not result in conviction. Communities also feel the effects. When individuals return home after detention, the impact extends to families, neighborhoods, and local systems. According to studies, high rates of detention in certain areas can influence economic stability, education, and social structures. The human cost of Rikers Island is not limited to those who are detained or those who work there. It extends outward, affecting a wider network of people and systems. It becomes part of a larger cycle, one that connects individual experiences to broader outcomes. Understanding this cost is essential to understanding the system as a whole. Because policies and structures are not separate from people. They shape experiences, and those experiences shape lives. As discussions about the future of Rikers Island continue, the human impact remains central. It is not just about closing a facility or building a new one. It is about addressing the conditions that affect individuals every day. Because in the end, the measure of any system is not only how it operates, but how it affects the people within it. And for Rikers Island, that impact has been significant, complex, and ongoing. This documentary is based on publicly available information and real-world accounts. Some details may be simplified for clarity. What Rikers reveals about the system. Rikers Island is often described as a problem to be fixed, a facility to be closed, or a system to be replaced. But beyond all of that, it represents something deeper. It reveals how a justice system functions under pressure, how policies translate into real-world outcomes, and how decisions made at different levels come together inside one place. To understand Rikers Island fully, it is not enough to look only at what happens within its walls. It requires looking at the system that feeds into it. The courts, the laws, the policies, and the processes that determine who ends up there, how long they stay, and under what conditions. One of the most defining aspects of Rikers Island is that many of the people held there are awaiting trial. According to publicly available data and reports, pre-trial detention remains a significant part of the jail's population. This means individuals are confined not because they have been convicted, but because their cases are still in progress. The reasons for this can vary. Bail decisions, case complexity, court scheduling, and legal processes all play a role. When cases move slowly, detention becomes longer. When detention becomes longer, the impact increases. This is not always the result of a single decision, but of a system where multiple factors interact. Delays in one area can affect outcomes in another. And over time, these delays accumulate. Rikers Island reflects this accumulation. It is where these delays become visible. Where time spent waiting becomes time spent inside. According to reports and research, the experience of pretrial detention can have lasting effects. Even short periods of confinement can disrupt employment, housing, and personal stability. For those held longer, the impact becomes more significant. And because this occurs before a final legal outcome, it raises important questions about fairness and balance within the system. The structure of the justice system also influences how Rikers operates. Decisions made in courtrooms affect population levels. Policies related to bail, sentencing, and alternatives to detention shape who enters the system and who remains outside it. When these policies change, the effects are seen inside the jail. For example, reforms aimed at reducing pretrial detention have led to changes in population size. According to public data, these changes have reduced the number of individuals held in some cases. But they have also introduced new challenges. Managing a smaller but more complex population requires different strategies. Individuals who remain in detention may have different needs, different risks, and different circumstances. This highlights a key reality. Changing one part of the system does not automatically resolve all issues. It shifts the balance. It changes the dynamics. And those changes must be managed carefully to avoid creating new pressures. Rikers Island also reveals how infrastructure interacts with policy. A system designed decades ago may not align with current needs. Buildings, layouts, and operational models that once functioned effectively can become less suitable over time. According to public reports, aging infrastructure has been one of the ongoing challenges at Rikers. Maintenance, repairs, and upgrades require continuous effort, and even then, limitations remain. These physical constraints affect daily operations. They influence how individuals are housed, how movement is managed, and how services are delivered. And when combined with staffing challenges, they can create conditions that are difficult to stabilize. Staffing itself is another reflection of broader system dynamics. Recruitment, retention, training, and working conditions all influence how effectively a facility operates. According to oversight findings, maintaining consistent staffing levels has been a challenge. When staffing is unstable, the effects are immediate. Supervision decreases. Delays increase. And the environment becomes more difficult to manage. But staffing challenges are not isolated to Rikers Island. They reflect broader trends in public service employment, where high-pressure roles can lead to burnout and turnover. Addressing these challenges requires more than short-term solutions. It requires long-term planning, support, and investment. Rikers Island also highlights the role of mental health within the justice system. A significant portion of the population has been reported to have mental health needs. According to public reports, managing these needs within a jail environment presents ongoing difficulties. Facilities designed for detention are not always equipped to provide comprehensive care, and when services are limited, conditions can worsen. This raises a broader question about where and how individuals with mental health needs should be supported. Whether the justice system is the appropriate place for that support, or whether alternative systems could provide more effective care. Rikers Island becomes a focal point for this question, because it brings these challenges into one place. Another aspect revealed by Rikers is the connection between detention and community impact. The individuals held on the island come from specific neighborhoods, and when they return, the effects of their experience extend outward. According to research, high rates of detention in certain communities can influence economic stability, education, and social structures. The impact is not limited to the individual. It becomes part of a larger cycle. This cycle is shaped by multiple factors. Legal decisions, economic conditions, access to services, and community resources all play a role. Rikers Island sits within this cycle, reflecting its outcomes while also contributing to its continuation. Oversight and reform efforts have attempted to address these interconnected issues. According to public records, initiatives have focused on reducing population, improving conditions, and increasing accountability. Some progress has been made. But the complexity of the system means that change is often gradual and uneven. What makes Rikers Island particularly significant is that it brings all of these elements together. Policy, infrastructure, staffing, mental health, and community impact are not separate issues. They interact. They influence each other. And they shape the overall experience of the system. Understanding Rikers Island, therefore, requires understanding these interactions. It requires looking beyond individual incidents and examining the structure as a whole. Not just what happens, but why it happens. Not just the outcomes, but the processes that lead to them. As plans to close Rikers Island continue, the question is not only how to replace a facility, but how to address the system it represents. Whether new structures will operate differently. Whether policies will evolve. And whether the underlying issues will be resolved or simply relocated. Because Rikers Island is not an isolated case. It is part of a broader system that exists in many forms across the country. Large detention facilities, complex legal processes, and interconnected challenges are not unique to one location. What makes Rikers different is its visibility. Its scale. And the level of scrutiny it has received. In the end, Rikers Island reveals more than conditions inside a jail. It reveals how a system functions when it is placed under sustained pressure. It shows where that system succeeds, where it struggles, and where it reaches its limits. And as that system continues to evolve, the lessons of Rikers Island remain. Not as a closed chapter, but as an ongoing reference point for what comes next. This documentary is based on publicly available information and real-world accounts. Some details may be simplified for clarity. Beyond the island. Rikers Island has come to represent more than a single jail complex. Over time, it has become a symbol of pressure within the justice system, of the challenges of reform, and of the gap that can exist between policy and reality. And as the conversation shifts toward what comes next, the focus moves beyond the island itself. Because closing Rikers Island does not end the story. It begins another one. According to official plans and public policy discussions, the future of detention in New York City is intended to look different. Smaller facilities, located within boroughs, are meant to replace the centralized structure of Rikers. The goal is to create a system that is closer to courts, more accessible to families, and better integrated into the city it serves. But this transition raises important questions. Will smaller facilities reduce the pressures that existed on the island? Will proximity to courts improve the speed of legal processes? Will conditions change in a way that meaningfully affects daily life? These are not simple questions, because the challenges seen at Rikers Island were not created by location alone. They were shaped by systems. Legal processes that determine how long people are held. Policies that influence who is detained and who is released. Resources that affect staffing, services, and infrastructure. Changing the physical space is one step. But the system that operates within that space must also evolve. According to public discussions and reports, one of the central goals moving forward is to reduce reliance on detention itself. Expanding alternatives, improving case processing times, and strengthening community-based support systems are all part of that effort. The idea is not only to change where people are held, but to reduce how often detention is used in the first place. If successful, this approach could shift the entire structure of the system. Fewer people entering detention. Shorter stays. Less pressure on facilities. But achieving that outcome requires coordination across multiple parts of the justice system. Courts must operate efficiently. Legal representation must be accessible. Support services must be available and effective. Without these elements working together, the underlying pressures could remain. For individuals who pass through the system, the future will be defined by how these changes are implemented. Will the experience of detention become more stable? More predictable? More aligned with its intended purpose? Or will the same challenges appear in new forms? Rikers Island has shown how quickly pressure can build when systems are not aligned. When infrastructure, staffing, policy, and oversight do not move in the same direction, the result is strain. And that strain is felt most directly by the people inside. The lessons of Rikers are not limited to one city. Across the United States and in other parts of the world, similar questions are being asked. How should detention be used? How can systems balance safety and fairness? And how can institutions adapt when existing models no longer meet current needs? Rikers Island provides a case study in these questions. Not because it is unique, but because it is visible. Its challenges have been documented, debated, and examined from multiple perspectives. And in that visibility, it offers insight. It shows what happens when systems operate beyond their intended capacity. It shows how conditions can develop over time, rather than all at once. And it shows how difficult it can be to implement change once those conditions are established. At the same time, it also shows the possibility of reform. Plans to close the island, to redesign the system, and to rethink detention reflect a willingness to address these issues. Whether those plans succeed will depend on how they are carried out, and how consistently they are applied. For those who have experienced Rikers Island directly, the future may carry a different meaning. It may represent accountability, or uncertainty, or both. Because change at the system level does not always translate immediately into change at the individual level. And for those who have not experienced it, Rikers remains a reminder. A reminder that systems of detention are not abstract. They are lived environments. They affect real people, in real ways, every day. In the end, the story of Rikers Island is not defined solely by its past or its present. It is defined by what it leads to. Whether the lessons learned result in meaningful change. Whether the system that replaces it addresses the challenges it revealed. And whether the balance between justice, fairness, and humanity becomes clearer over time. Because moving beyond Rikers Island is not just about leaving a place behind. It is about deciding what comes next. And whether the next system will be different. The final question. Rikers Island has been examined from many angles. Its structure, its conditions, its challenges, and its future have all been discussed in detail. But beyond all of that, there is one question that remains. Not about a single facility, but about the system it represents. What is detention supposed to be? At its core, detention is meant to serve a purpose. To ensure that individuals return to court. To maintain safety while legal processes unfold. To hold people temporarily, not permanently. But in practice, the experience can become something more complex. Rikers Island shows how that complexity develops. When cases take time, detention extends. When resources are strained, conditions shift. When systems overlap, outcomes become harder to predict. And over time, the original purpose of detention can begin to blur. According to publicly available data and reports, many individuals held at Rikers Island are not serving sentences. They are waiting. Waiting for court dates, for decisions, for outcomes that determine what happens next. And during that waiting, they experience the system in its most direct form. This raises an important question about balance. How does a system ensure accountability without creating unnecessary harm? How does it manage risk without creating instability? How does it remain fair when outcomes are not always predictable? These are not questions with simple answers. They exist at the intersection of law, policy, and human experience. Rikers Island brings those questions into focus because it concentrates them in one place. It shows what happens when systems are under pressure. It shows how decisions made at one level affect outcomes at another. And it shows how individuals experience those outcomes in real time. Over the years, efforts to address these issues have taken many forms. Policy changes, oversight measures, and long-term planning have all been part of the response. Some have produced measurable results. Others have revealed new challenges. This is often how complex systems evolve. Change does not occur all at once. It happens in stages, with each step influencing the next. But there is also a broader perspective to consider. Rikers Island is not the only facility facing these challenges. Across different regions, systems of detention are being re-examined. Questions about pretrial detention, mental health, staffing, and infrastructure are being raised in multiple contexts. What makes Rikers different is the level of attention it has received. Its scale, its visibility, and the depth of its challenges have made it a focal point for discussion. And because of that, it has become a reference point. A place where broader issues are made visible. For policymakers, it represents a case study. For advocates, it represents a call for reform. For those who have experienced it, it represents something more personal. And for the public, it represents a question. Not just about Rikers Island itself, but about how systems of detention should function. As plans for closure and transition continue, the focus will remain on outcomes. Whether new systems reduce the pressures seen on the island. Whether conditions improve. Whether the balance between control and fairness becomes clearer. But even as those changes unfold, the questions raised by Rikers will not disappear. They will follow the system into its next phase. Because the core issue is not only about where detention takes place. It is about how it is used, how it is managed, and how it affects those within it. Rikers Island has shown that when systems reach their limits, the effects are visible. Not only in reports or data, but in daily experience. And it has shown that addressing those limits requires more than adjustment. It requires reflection. A willingness to examine not just outcomes, but underlying assumptions. Not just conditions, but causes. In the end, the story of Rikers Island leads to a final point. Not a conclusion, but a question that remains open. If a system is designed to hold people temporarily, but in practice creates long-term impact, how should that system change? And if change is necessary, what does that change look like in reality? Because the future of detention will not be defined by one facility, or one decision. It will be defined by how these questions are answered. What the system chooses to be. Rikers Island has been described in many ways. As a jail. As a system. As a crisis. But beyond all descriptions, it represents something more fundamental. A choice. Not a single decision, but a series of choices made over time. Choices about how detention is used, how systems are managed, and how individuals are treated while they move through the justice process. These choices are not always visible. They are built into policies, procedures, and daily operations. They shape how long cases take, how facilities are maintained, and how resources are distributed. And over time, they define the experience of the system itself. Rikers Island reflects the outcome of those choices. It shows what happens when systems expand without fully adapting. When infrastructure ages while demands increase. When policies evolve, but not always in alignment with one another. And when the balance between control and care becomes difficult to maintain. According to public records and reports, the challenges seen at Rikers did not develop overnight. They emerged gradually. Through years of decisions that, individually, may have seemed manageable, but collectively created pressure. This is often how complex systems reach their limits. Not through a single failure, but through accumulation. And once those limits are reached, the question becomes how to respond. Efforts to address the situation have taken many forms. Increased oversight. Policy adjustments. Long-term planning. Each represents a step toward change. But each also highlights the complexity of the system being changed. Because Rikers Island is not an isolated structure. It is connected to courts, to communities, to policies, and to broader social systems. Changing one part requires consideration of the others. For example, reducing the jail population depends on how cases are processed. Improving conditions depends on staffing, infrastructure, and resources. Expanding alternatives to detention depends on community programs and support systems. These elements are interconnected. And when they move out of alignment, the system feels the impact. One of the central challenges is consistency. Policies may change, but implementation can vary. Standards may be set, but meeting them requires sustained effort. Plans may be developed, but carrying them out takes time. According to oversight findings, this gap between intention and implementation has been a recurring issue. Not because of a lack of awareness, but because of the difficulty of maintaining consistency across a large and complex system. Rikers Island highlights this gap. It shows how systems can recognize problems, begin to address them, and still struggle to achieve lasting stability. It reflects the difference between identifying an issue and resolving it. At the same time, it also demonstrates the role of accountability. Public scrutiny, legal intervention, and independent oversight have all contributed to bringing attention to conditions inside the jail. These mechanisms create pressure for change. They ensure that issues are documented, that progress is measured, and that systems are held to defined standards. But accountability is not only external. It also exists within the system itself. In how policies are enforced, how staff are supported, and how decisions are made on a daily basis. Sustainable change depends on both levels working together. As the future of Rikers Island continues to develop, the focus will remain on outcomes. Whether new facilities operate differently. Whether policies lead to more predictable experiences. Whether individuals are treated in ways that align with the intended purpose of detention. These outcomes will determine not only the success of the transition, but the direction of the system as a whole. Because at its core, the story of Rikers Island is not only about one place. It is about how systems define themselves. Through the choices they make. Through the priorities they set. Through the way they respond to pressure. And those choices continue. Every policy adjustment. Every operational decision. Every reform effort. Each one contributes to what the system becomes. In the end, Rikers Island stands as a moment of reflection. A point where the system has been examined, questioned, and challenged. And as it moves forward, the question is no longer only about what went wrong. It is about what comes next. What kind of system will replace it? What values will guide it? And how those values will be reflected in practice. Because systems are not defined by intention alone. They are defined by what they do. And the future of detention will depend on the choices that are made now. This documentary is based on publicly available information and real-world accounts. Some details may be simplified for clarity. What remains after the story? Rikers Island is often talked about as a place. An island. A jail complex. A location surrounded by water and separated from the city. But by now, it should be clear. Rikers Island is not just a place. It is a reflection. A reflection of how a system works under pressure. How decisions made far away, are felt up close. And how policies, procedures, and realities collide in ways that are not always visible from the outside. Because what happens inside Rikers Island doesn't stay there. It extends outward. Into courtrooms. Into communities. Into the lives of people who pass through it, and those connected to them. And that is what makes this story important. Not because it is unique. But because it is revealing. When people think about jail. They often think in simple terms. Right or wrong. Guilt or innocence. Punishment or freedom. But the reality is more complex. Because many of the people inside Rikers Island are not serving sentences. They are waiting. Waiting for decisions that can take time. Waiting in an environment that continues moving, even when their cases do not. And during that waiting, the system becomes their reality. Not temporarily, but fully. This documentary has shown different sides of that reality. The structure. The daily life. The pressure. The people. The system behind it all. Each chapter revealing a different layer. But together, they tell one story. A story about limits. About what happens when a system is stretched. Not in one moment. But over years. When small issues build into larger ones. When temporary solutions become long-term conditions. When the gap between intention and reality grows wider. Rikers Island did not become what it is overnight. It developed over time. Through decisions. Through policies. Through changes that did not always align. And like many complex systems, it reached a point where those pressures could no longer be ignored. That is when attention increased. When oversight stepped in. When conversations about reform became unavoidable. But even then, change did not happen instantly. Because changing a system is not the same as recognizing a problem. It requires coordination, consistency, and time. And now, as plans move forward to close Rikers Island, the focus shifts. From what it was, to what comes next. But that transition carries its own questions. Will the next system be different? Will it operate more effectively? Will it avoid the same pressures? Or will the same challenges appear again? In a new form? Because in the end, the future of detention is not determined by buildings. It is determined by systems. By how decisions are made. How policies are applied. How people are treated, within those systems. And that is where the real change must happen. Rikers Island has shown what happens when systems are pushed to their limits. It has shown the impact of delay. The effects of pressure. The consequences of imbalance. But it has also created something else. Awareness. A clearer understanding of how these systems function. And where they struggle. For some, Rikers Island represents failure. For others, it represents a turning point. But for everyone, it represents a question. Not just about one jail, but about the system as a whole. What is detention supposed to be? A temporary measure? A form of control? A step within a larger process? And how should it operate? When it affects real people, in real ways, every single day. Because behind every system, there are individuals. People waiting. People working. People navigating an environment that is shaped by decisions they did not make. And their experiences are the true measure of how that system functions. As this story comes to an end, Rikers Island remains. Still operating. Still under pressure. Still part of an ongoing conversation. But the focus is no longer only on the island itself. It is on what it represents. And what will be done differently moving forward. Because the story of Rikers Island is not just about the past. It is about the future. A future where systems can be improved. If the lessons are understood. A future where change is possible. If it is applied consistently. And a future where the balance between justice, fairness, and humanity is not just discussed, but practiced. And that is where the story truly ends. Not with a conclusion, but with a choice. What kind of system should exist? And how should it treat the people within it? If you want more real, deep documentaries like this, subscribe to Documentary channel. Because the stories behind these systems are the ones most people never see. Until now.